He was not only the last president not to be a member of the Trilateral Commission, he was the last candidate of either party. So voting isn't the only answer. Certainly, trying to vote for president isn't the answer. We have to change the system. John was talking about put your body in the gears. Well, there are some ways to do that. We have a start. We have a few members of Congress that do want to serve the people, that want to follow the Constitution, honor the truth, and serve the people. They don't all have the same ideas, but this handful is something to start with. There are people like Ron Paul, Dennis Kucinich, and Alan Grayson. And we need more in the Congress like them. And we tried a few years ago, 2008, about 30 members of the Patriots ran for Congress, but they all ran as Greens, Libertarians, Independents, and write-ins, and nobody got elected. Because our system is stacked. If you're not a Republican or a Democrat, the chances of you getting elected to a major office are pretty close to nil. You know, as they say, slim and none, and slim just left town. So what we're proposing for our folks this year is to run as Republicans and Democrats. Each chapter of the Patriots around the country should get one of its members to run in the Democratic primary and one of its members to run in the Republican primary, and especially run against any incumbent and get them out. Now, we can win by infiltrating the major parties and taking them over and taking over the Congress. And then we can change the system so that the system is wide open for independents and third parties. But changing the system is something that's very hard to do when you're asking the Congress to change the system, and the Congress is made up of Republicans and Democrats. So we need to infiltrate first and change second, in my view. Now, I've got a whole chapter in my book on how we as individuals can help take back the country and get a government that serves the people. This book hasn't been published yet, but tonight we're going to be giving all of you Patriot cards with my home address, home telephone number, email address, and website on it. And all you have to do is contact me and say you want a copy of my new book, and we'll email you an advance copy in a Microsoft Word attachment. It's a short book. You can probably read it in 2 or 3 hours. So I'm not going to go into all the details tonight of, you know, how we go about it and all the dozen or so suggestions as to if you're going to bother writing your Congress critter, how do you do it to make your letter count? How do you run for office and all the rest of that? We'll leave that, if you're interested in the details, again, request a copy of my book. What I'd like to do tonight is do something which is necessary sort of before all that. We were talking about who chooses our president, our leaders in Congress, and so forth. And it's instructive, I think, to hear a little story about Benjamin Franklin and the Iroquois. When Benjamin Franklin was a fairly young man, he attended an Iroquois powwow. He was very interested in how the Iroquois nations had 1,000 years of peace and prosperity. And at the powwow, he asked the big chief how it was done. And the big chief says, well, it's really quite simple. The crones select the chiefs. The grandmothers of the tribes select the chiefs. And they can unselect the chiefs if the chiefs don't serve the people. The other part of it is that the chiefs cannot take the Iroquois nations to war without the approval of the crones. I think in this country, if the grandmothers selected our leaders and had a veto over going to war, we'd have a heck of a lot better government. Now, there's a lot more about that Iroquois powwow, and that's in my book too. And maybe we can get to some of that Q&A if we have time. But what I'd like to do now is give you my vision of what we ought to be working toward. What kind of country should we have? What kind of government should we be demanding and building? If we don't know what we want the government to do for us, then it's hard for us to demand anything. Well, there are some obvious things now. I mean, we want an end to the war. We've wanted that for a long time, and we've been ignored. The majority of the American people have wanted a single-payer national health program for a long time, and we've been ignored. The American people wanted a nuclear freeze in 1982. They didn't get it. We've been demanding a lot of things of a government that really could care less what we want. So we have to start infiltrating and building, but the people that we put in there have to share the vision. They have to know what they're going to do different when they get there. And I'm talking about real change, not the chump change we've seen in the last year or two. So I'm going to conclude this with the latest version of my inaugural address. It's the inaugural address of a radical president. And because I firmly believe, I used to give a State of the Union address. I started that in 1992 when I just wrote an article tearing to pieces George H.W. Bush's State of the Union address. And then I said, well, if I publish this, people have a right to say, well, it's easy to criticize, but could you do any better? So I said, I think I better try. So I wrote my own State of the Union address, and I've been doing it ever since. But I've been convinced in the last few years that a president is not going to have the time to wait for his State of the Union address. If he wants to make the kind of real changes we need in this country, he's going to have to do it on Inauguration Day, without warning. The reason John F. Kennedy got assassinated was because he tipped his hand. Too many people knew what he was up to. He had ongoing arguments with the CIA over the Bay of Pigs. He argued with the Joint Chiefs of Staff over whether or not to bomb Cuba. He ordered the Pentagon to give him a plan for how they were going to bring all of our troops home from Vietnam by the end of the year. All the guys knew what he was up to, though he didn't get to do it. If the president's going to have to change things, he's going to have to do it without warning and do it quickly. So I want you to pretend that I am speaking to you as President of the United States at my inauguration. In the audience are all the members of Congress and, the Joint Chiefs and the Cabinet and, of course, you, the American people.